several clergy in Russia.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Global Atheist News Review. This is where the opinionated people express their views on the week's news, all about how religion has impacted humanity. So, who have we got? Let's have a look. There's Guy from the Manchester area. Welcome, Guy.
I say less opinionated and more wise. That's what I'd like to think. Yeah. Okay, I'll buy that. Thousands wouldn't. And Frank from Kentucky. Welcome, Frank. There's Ty from Tennessee. Welcome, Ty.
How the devil are you?
That's my catchphrase. They keep stealing my catchphrase. And David from Manhattan. And Esther from the Midlands of the UK. Welcome, you guys. Welcome all. And pitching straight in, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. And we've got quite a lot of news items today. You know about the activities in Iran, the protests that have been going on. Well, about 1,000 people have been arrested and charged in connection with these protests. And the city of Tehran's chief prosecutor has accused them of acts of sabotage, including murdering security guards and arson. And they face open mass trials this week. Now, they say there's about 1,000, but rights activists have put the number of those arrested throughout the country at 14,000. What do you think of that, guys?
Well, it's what we expect, repression to look like, I'm afraid. And in fact, it's going to go on, I think, until such time as the whole thing collapses. And that doesn't appear to be happening anytime soon.
Yeah. So this announcement came as two teenage protesters who were allegedly killed by security forces were buried in northeast Iran. One of them, Kumar Daroftate, age 16, was shot at close range and he died in hospital. Another one in the south was a girl of 16 again, who was hit by bird shot fired by security forces. And there's been events at funerals where the mourners have been shouting slogans against the government. So what's going to happen? Is it ever going to end, or are we stuck with this for a few more months? So I think the 7th week of their upheaval.
I mean, this has been years in the making. You can't expect it to all just go away at the first protest, at the first pushback. It's an ongoing thing. It's a conversation that still needs to keep on. Unfortunately, it's sad to hear 16-year-olds being shot to death, losing their lives. That's it. It's like, where do you begin, right? The other girl that started this whole thing off, right? She was only 22.
Yes.
These are young people.
Yeah.
My heart breaks for the people of Iran.
Yes, indeed. They are making more fuss, though, because there was a big rally of students in the Amir Kabir University, Tehran, who chanted, and there's a video of this that was in the news, "We won't leave Iran, we'll take back, Iran. This is our last message. The regime is our target.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting thing is, if you look at old pictures of Iran, and I don't mean old, but like you go back to the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at pictures of Iran, it's women in short skirts wearing go-go sunglasses, walking down the street like they got off the set from the Brady Bunch. Like if you're over 40 and you're Iranian, you remember a very different time of what your country looked like and operated compared to the political turmoil that's caused it to be what it is now.
Yeah.
And you really want to fight to get it back to where it was. And so like my heart goes out to those that because it feels tangible. For a lot of us in America, when we keep hearing these terrible stories of like a punished and unrested Iran, this is fairly relatively new environment that they've been put in. So like I'm hoping for the best for them to get out of it. Beyond platitudes, I think we can work to like, you know, applaud the actions that are going on over there. And then, you know, obviously support whatever anti-thought speak is being issued by that propaganda. Like it's one thing to say like, hey, I support the fight in Iran, but I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to make this mentionable. It's like, no, speak up about it, because that's how we get more people to make it a popular opinion, to actually cause some action to hopefully, you know, curb towards the interests of the people that live there.
Silence is not golden in this instance.
No, what's interesting is that we'll take back our country is a very strong political message, and it worked in England for the Brexiteers who claimed that they were taking our country back from the European Union. Sadly, that was a very, in my view, mistaken idea. But I think and I think in America, this is the sort of thing that Trump says, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
So it is powerful.
But not on Twitter.
I think for me, when I hear people saying, "We'll take our country back, make America great again," okay, we're looking back at the time before. We want to go back to that. But I feel like we can never ever get back to what you used to have. Change has to happen.
Yes.
People have to evolve. They've got to get used to a new system of living. Now you have the younger people, they're having a voice. Back in those days, I'm sure the Iranian youth probably weren't able to have such a strong voice like they do now. So however you go back to, you know, you want to take it back, I feel like everyone now has to evolve. Everyone, both old, both young. You can never ever get back what you once had. But we can try now, and okay, we sit down now and try and figure out, how do we take this country forward? How do we make a country that works for everyone? You know, but going back and let's make such and such great again, and I just think it's highly impossible.
Forward is the way, not back. Well, one of you mentioned propaganda, and I think it was you, Ty.
Yeah, that was me.
And you'll be interested to hear that it's going on. Propaganda is going on in India, further east than Iran, where, as you know, the Hindu Nationalist Party is in control at the moment. And what they are doing is trying to revise the history. And they're doing it, let me find this bit, they're producing, it's a project under the BJP, to rewrite India's history according to the Hindutva ideology. And the version that they're propagating is that of an ancient Hindu nation that's been oppressed and persecuted for hundreds of years by ruthless Muslim invaders, particularly the Islamic Mughal Empire that ruled from the 16th to the 19th century. So here's somebody else, another community that wants to go back to the past, only they want to go back by a good few more years. What they're doing,
everyone wants to go back.
what they're doing
Well, actually, most revolutionary movements hark back to an alleged
Yes.
golden age. And,
Right.
we were talking about Iran 40 years ago. In fact, there was a lot of political repression going
Yes.
on. And even though they were able to wear short skirts and stuff, we had in this country, and I'm sure you had them in the States, refugees and dissidents from the Shah's repression.
Yes.
So the Iranians really had a rotten time.
Yeah. Well, what they're doing in India is they're claiming that mosques are illegal structures that were built on a destroyed 10th century Hindu temple for the god Shiva base. So they're claiming that they have rightful ownership of the land and should be able to pray there.
Well, I think the pagans might use the same argument in England, because a lot of church sites were originally pagan and, polytheistic sites of worship.
Yes, indeed.
This is so tribal. It reminds me of the same ideology used by both the Israelites and the Palestinians over who has determination over land that was equally used by these Bedouin tribes before they were known in their modern by their modern names. And so, instead of looking to share and create a level of abundance, it's about whose tribe is responsible for what massacre or what indignation, and then you keep going back retroactively until you're the victim and somebody else is not is the perpetrator, and it gets you nowhere, except it just fulfills a ethno-religious need to feel greater than somebody else, and it doesn't lead to peace.
No. It's a case of which tribe occupied which piece of desert first.
Yes.
Well, even the Taj Mahal was built by the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan many, many years ago. Actually, not that long, a couple of hundred, I think. But that's subject to a litigation which claims that it was originally a Hindu temple with locked rooms of Hindu relics. So there we go.
Yeah.
You mentioned Israel, and you'll be you won't be pleased to hear what happened there this week. There was a beheading of a 25-year-old gay man in Hebron. And apparently there's quite a few LGBT Palestinians who are fleeing from the Palestinian owned part of that the Near East because of the way they are victimized for being homosexual or differently sexual. And they are seeking sanctuary in, of all places, Israel, merely because it's near, but, it's not going to be very tolerant, is it? So this poor guy, Ahmad Abu Mahia, 25 years old, his body was found on the West Bank earlier this month. He'd been living in Tel Aviv for 2 years, and nobody knows what or who or how he was taken back to Hebron, where he was beheaded. However, this is not a unique case. Hundreds of gay Palestinians are fleeing their homes for asylum in the unlikely place of Israel. And this has prompted an Israeli playwright named of Tomer Al-Dubai. And he's written and directed a new play about their experiences. It's called Sharif. And it tells about the limbo that these people go through as they struggle to make a life for themselves in the Jewish state, being in the closet while they're doing it, And this play has been premiered in Israel. And Tomer, the playwright, is hoping it will be staged in London.
Well, sounds quite interesting as a topic, I must say.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you've got this religious fanaticism on what people are considered, the Palestinians, who are an oppressed people, taking out violence against oppressed people. If you're a member of the LGBT community living in the West, or certainly not in the West, you are going to be facing some really difficult times. Now, it's interesting that Israel just had an election where Netanyahu, the disgraced leader of the country, was reelected by a confluence of several alt-right religious parties to bring this guy back into power. So
that's another item later in the show. We will visit that item.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but there's a lot of places in the world that are not very tolerant of sexual variation.
Right.
I mean, I know that you don't get welcomed in Alabama, or maybe not in Kentucky, if you come out. Is that right, Frank? Ty?
You're welcome here in Lovell, Kentucky. The rest of the state, maybe not so much.
Right.
Right. Even I have apprehension about letting people know about asexuality. So like it's especially here, though I have found, and that's something I discovered like in my 30s, right? And until then I just thought I was a straight person because that's, has to be the norm. And that there might have been something slightly wrong with just how much libido I experienced, but I was framing my sexuality in a completely different perspective of like, oh, you're like saying like a gay person is just a straight person who thinks women look like men. I was doing that kind of like twisting. I was like, no, I'm not a straight person with a low libido. I just didn't know how many options there were. And I think a lot of people would have an enlightening experience if they just looked at the different kinds of sexual orientations that are available and realized, oh, maybe it's not just straight and gay. If those are only two, yeah, I can pick one. I can be forced to decide with one. But if I were to truly see the nuance of the options, this actually applies to me way more. And I think that's what the whole sexual orientation or movement or whatever is about, is just realizing like, oh, the authoritative standards that were given to me, or the options that were handed down to me from a very puritanical point of view, are not broadly applicable to the individual. And when you realize when you have different options, it kind of pulls away from the power of, well, if I'm religious, I must be straight and I must like this and I must like that. It's like, no, actually there's better options out here that closely identify with who you are and how you choose to identify yourself. And that pulls away from like the dogmatic power of, well, we're all one group, we're all one tribe. I wish it didn't inhibit people's self-discovery. And when it does, especially when it's in this violent a format, it's even more depressing because it doesn't solve the problem. It just adds more shame to people who want to identify something other than, one thing, or people who are in that religion right now who have these ideas or ideations of some point and now have to deal with all this shame that there's something wrong with them because they don't want to have to deal with the repercussions of being honest with who they are. It's a terrible situation.
One of the problems is that humans seem to have a predisposition to want to put things into either or with no middle. It's all about polarizing. There's no middle. And unfortunately, the natural realm isn't like that.
Right.
There's mostly middle and very few. Look at the normal distribution curve,
That's right.
So like a spectrum.
Right.
When you talk about sex and sexuality, it is a spectrum. There are people that just wouldn't fit into these two genders. Some people will find themselves, floating between those two somewhere, and today they could identify as male. Nothing stops them identifying as female the next day. Who has the authority to tell people what they're feeling and what they're thinking? And the fact that you're a god a God that creates the heavens, creates the earth, creates the universe, and all these things, somehow cares so much about what people do with their private parts. That's one of the reasons
Right.
why. That's one of the reasons why I'm an atheist, because I could not, for the life of me, worship a God that cares what people do with their private parts, and he even gets to watch. Because how else would he know if he's not watching, right? So
He likes
It's
a bit
pretty
of
pathetic, isn't it?
salaciousness.
he's a voyeur.
The
Yeah,
voice,
you're right.
I never thought of that thought. Yeah.
So my two cheeky comments are: if God hated gay people so much, he'd stop making straight people make them. And then the other one would be like, if I was an engineer and I really wanted to make sure gay sex didn't happen, I wouldn't make the round peg fit in the round hole. I would change the shape of one of those two
Dr.
things
Tai.
and immediately
Yeah.
fix that problem.
That's right.
I like
You
that.
can't fill your diesel car with petrol, can you? So
So true, right?
it can be done. Come on, God, get better at engineering.
Right.
So, what was I going to say? I'm going to move on because I've driven out of my head what I was going to say here.
You got distracted with that discussion.
Yes, you've been great, guys. I love it. So, going to Brazil now. Yes, we were talking about elections and so on, weren't we? Because they've been very popular lately. And there's been two presidential candidates. The election's finished now. We know who is the winner, even though Bolsonaro doesn't readily admit that he lost. He's known as the tropical Trump, which I rather like. It seemed to be apt. Anyway, he apparently, during the campaign, he regularly used the name of Jesus to try and deceive the good faith of men and women by painting Lula as somebody who does not respect religion because he's friendly with Daniel Ortega from Nicaragua. And Daniel shuts down churches, arrests priests, forbids processions, and so on. And so Bolsonaro has claimed that that's what Lula wants to do. Meanwhile, Lula has said that Bolsonaro keeps using the name of Jesus to deceive people. So the whole thing has turned into a religious spat. But in fact, both men are Catholic. So I don't know what they've got to argue about, but they've managed to turn it into a faith-based conflict.
Yeah.
Faith-based conflict, and that exactly is where the problem lies with religion. When everyone now starts to, I've got the right religion, no, you've got you, and then the fighting between both of them, right? We from the outside looking in, we can see what the problem is. We can see that, you know, you all have got it all wrong. But how do you tell them? How do you make them understand? I know.
Well, you know, in this case, and you have it in the United States too, we're coming up to midterm elections where, you know, people are bringing Jesus into the conversation all the time. And it's about creating fear. It's not about creating cooperation or love. It's about creating some tribal idea that, you know, you vote for me because I'm on the right side of God. Just like the violence in Iran and the attack on LGBT in Palestine, anytime you invoke God as just so happens to have your point of view, and it's, of course, if it's a violent point of view, nothing good will come out of it. And if you have elections that are based on who loves Jesus more, then everybody loses.
Yeah, very true. Well said.
Yeah.
So I'm getting out something I want to show you guys.
Okay.
Because you've mentioned how religion poisons everything. So what do you think?
I hope it's something nice. Oh yes, that is lovely. Oh, yes, Christopher Hitchens.
This is an original acrylic painting, framed, as you can see, and I'm going to auction it on eBay, and the funds raised will go to Atheism UK.
Oh, wonderful.
So if you want to own this, you will be able to make a bid.
Wow. Let us know when it goes up live, please.
Yeah,
yes.
Sure. Will do.
Is it by Picasso by any chance?
No, it would probably have a deformed nose and a fried egg on his face.
Hey, don't say that. He's still alive and he's watching the show right now.
If it was by Picasso, trust me, it wouldn't be anywhere in John's house. It'd be somewhere else altogether.
Anyway, you mentioned, well, we've already been to Israel. We're going back because, as David said, they've been having an election and they've elected the return of Benjamin Netanyahu, who's already right-wing enough. Let's face it, he's pretty right-wing nutcase. But in order to get back in, he needed the support of a smaller party, which is led by Itamar Ben-Gvir. And this is a guy who's known for his inflammatory anti-Arab speeches and stunts, and he's been attracting support from a previously untapped demographic, the young ultra-Orthodox Jews. And apparently the country has been shifting rightwards over the years, and this shift is particularly noticeable among Israel's 1.3 million ultra-Orthodox Jews, who make up 13% of the population. And this guy was seen drawing a gun, brandishing a pistol, because he was at some event where I think the Palestinians were throwing stones, and he was calling out, if they throw stones, shoot them. What a nice guy.
God is love. Yeah. That's
about that. It's just very sad.
Yeah.
And I suppose the Palestinians aren't allowed guns, so there's no right to bear arms there.
Well, you held up a picture of Hitchens, and I think he phrased it best when he said religion poisons everything, and you can see that in people's emotional makeup, in their relation to kin, and into their relation to each other. There's no greater barrier that keeps us as a species away from being able to move forward than the idea that my God is better than your God, or my God is better than the fact that you don't have a God. And if you don't, I immediately take offense, and you are the bad person.
Yeah.
And the silliest thing is we've seen in every sci-fi movie or in history, whenever there's a group of more technologically advanced people going to a place where there's still people worshiping rocks or smoke, the only thing that goes on in those people's heads are, can't wait to exploit these people. Like, I can't wait to get these. In fact, that's what Avatar is, and Avatar 2 is coming out, but we've seen it with like Spaniards and Native Americans, and we've seen it with sex or slave trade in Africa. Like, this is a situation where you only make yourselves vulnerable. A lot of people are motivated by selfish ideas, and there's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to do things that are in your benefit. I think that's really, really good, actually. But what is worse to your benefit than operating under a completely flawed methodology of determining what's real and what's not real? And what more vulnerable space could you put yourself in when someone who has technology and opportunity to take advantage of you and simply just tells you a couple of words or key phrases and gets you to vote out of your own interest, or protest something that actually does benefit you, or make you hate people that could care about you or make your society better? One last spiel: the anti-intellectualism that is propagated in a lot of political circles is like, I'm just a down to earth blue collar guy. I want to be in charge of all this. I don't have no fancy education. I'm like, this is the guy who's qualified to lead you then, because the other guy might have learned some things, and that could actually be useful. Since when was that a bad thing? Learning things like we should be in a position where we always try to improve ourselves intellectually, always willing to question. And the people who tell us not to, those are the people that should be the ones we're most suspicious of. But religion, time and time again, tends to stamp that out of ourselves. And I wish that wasn't the case.
Well, do you remember? I mean, when one of the criticisms of President Obama by the right or Fox News was always that he was too professorial. That is because he chose to use, he chose his words. Yeah.
And he would think about his words.
Yeah, that how dare he? And there's an awful lot of racism in that too.
Oh yeah.
Not only anti-intellectualism, but a heck of a lot of racism in there too.
Yes. Well, I can't help thinking of George Carlin, who said, I've said this before on here, but it's worth repeating. He said, just think how stupid the average man is, and then realize that 50% of us are more stupid than that. And that's the thing, isn't it? In an election, you want to vote for somebody like you. So that means you want to vote for somebody stupid.
Well, how is it like with Trump, who may run again, and it may in as little as right after the midterm elections announce his candidacy? This guy's allegedly a billionaire, right? But if you talk to the people who are in West Virginia or down south, how he has been able to bamboozle these people into thinking he's just like them.
Right.
Yes.
It's just fascinating sociologically and psychologically to watch the commitment of people who are Trump supporters now, based on not only alt-right things, but or ideas or conspiracies, but also the white nationalism and the white Christian nationalism, how that movement has evolved to include the adulation of Trump. The adoration of Trump is just fascinating.
Yeah. Well, you'll be pleased to hear that England, the UK, Great Britain, is not immune to electing, how shall I put it, inappropriate people. I'm trying to dumb it down a bit here. Be more tolerant, diplomatic, maybe.
How about fumbling, bumbling people?
Yes, that would be appropriate. Yes. Anyway, this particular person is a practicing Roman Catholic. She's a member of the Conservative Christian Fellowship. Her name is Maria Caulfield, MP. She voted against buffer zones outside abortion clinics, and she voted against legalizing abortion in Northern Ireland. And she's just been appointed to the position of, guess what? Minister for Women.
Oh, no. Don't say.
Yeah. So that's true. Then we got Suella Braverman as well, Home Secretary. She's from the far right of the party, and then this is another one. And I mean, I think what the critics are saying, or the commentators are saying, is that Sunak is trying to keep together the wings of the Conservative Party, by bringing on some representatives from all sides or factions.
And some of them are really nasty, and I don't see this tactic as working particularly.
So this is an example of, I think, democracy eating itself. When you are so inclusive that you accept the people who want nothing more than to tear down the fundamental idea of human and civil rights.
Right. Yeah.
That's right.
This is what's happening in the U.S., I believe. But this is what happens. Democracy eats itself alive.
Yeah.
And people don't realize democracy is fragile.
Yeah.
Like
It only works when everyone agrees that it's a good thing.
Yep.
Yes. I've heard it said that Suella, what's her name, Braverman, yes, was only appointed in order to show that Priti Patel wasn't as bad as we thought she was.
The one before, Priti Patel was the Home Secretary. Actually, not immediately before, but I think 2 or 3 back, but that's only a few weeks.
Yes, there was a lot of musical chairs going on back then. Yeah. So in Georgia, Black Church.
Oh, that Georgia. Okay.
The US, Georgia. Yeah. Black church leaders and activists have rallied in a push to get their congregants to vote, because apparently a lot of them don't bother to go to put their tick on the ballot paper. And this is apparently a long-standing tradition, which is known as getting souls to the polls. And it's particularly important this year because, of course, 2 or 3 of the states are really crucial in the battle for Democrat retention of of Congress, basically the 2 houses. And so what they've done is they've been going through the churches in order to motivate potential voters, and they've been offering, the expression is logistical support to get people to go directly from church service and go on. So they're talking about busing them or putting them in taxis or their own cars to get them there.
Right.
And what we have here is an alignment of a religion with electing representatives of government. And that's precisely what the American Constitution was set out not to do.
Now, the terrifying thing, well, not terrifying, let's take things in context, right? When I went to go vote a couple of weeks ago, the cool thing is, at least in my polling station, you're allowed to bring your smartphone with you and look up the names of the people that you're voting for. If you aren't absolutely familiar with them, you can get yourself familiar with the ballot. And the cool thing is when you're looking up names, you can look at previous interviews that they've done in text, so you can just quickly read through what their positions are on things. And I have, and in Tennessee, and particularly in the area where I'm at, it's a little unfortunate because you're constantly debating on which crazy religious zealot are you going to be voting for. But one of them I knew in my head was of the opinion that America was not situated on freedom from religion. What they said was the founders were actually very religious, and it was just a question of which kind of Christianity that they wanted to subscribe to. But clearly all of them were Christians. Therefore, Christianity in any of its propagations is fair to promote. It's just a question of which denomination is the true issue. And that's what they were referring to when they said freedom of religion. And in my head, it's such a gross contortion of reality that I can't be surprised when I see buses of churches or buses filled with people from churches lining up to vote, and like people at public assemblies representing the town or governance that they were elected to starting meetings with a prayer, or and God we trust being on license plates issued out by our governing body or in schools. It has permeated the American culture because a lot of people aren't willing to question how we got here in the first place, because they have a version of history in their head that's comfortable to them. And I don't think we touched this on it before, but a lot of people, when they don't have anything to lose, are prime targets for indoctrination because the argument from comfort feels good. And so when you say God loves you, it feels good. That makes you feel comfortable. When you're in such a privileged position that you don't feel like worrying about other people, here comes God and says, you don't have to worry about them. Just pray and we'll take care of it with our thoughts and prayers. Meanwhile, you can keep feeling awesome and happy. I'm like, oh, cool, 2 birds with 1 stone. I get to make I get to make 6 figures, and I don't have to worry about poor people. Like God's giving me all the great excuses. That's
What do you
that's
think?
the problem.
Should the candidates give out teddy bears? What do you think, Frank? Would that work in your part of the world?
Yeah, it would work. But what we do here, though, I've got the ballot. We got it off the line. Anybody in Kentucky can go get the ballot and print it out and have it there. So we can do our homework before we get to the ballot box. And I think we may be setting a record for the number of citizens that are doing just that, downloading and getting prepared. Yeah, I don't think that's bad news.
Absolutely. Good. Okay, so back to the UK. We have a national union of students, similar to the one that you have in the US. And it's had a president called Shaima Dalali. And you can tell that she's of Muslim extraction, ethnically from a Muslim or Islamic family. And she's just been dismissed over anti-Semitic claims because in 2012, she posted a tweet that included an Arabic chant that referenced what has been described as a massacre of Jews in the year, listen to this, AD 628. She's apologized for that, but that wasn't good enough, and they've sacked her. Because
I think she was 10 or something at the time, wasn't she?
Yeah, exactly. The Union of Jewish Students said the fact that she'd been elected in the first place was a symptom of a wider problem in the National Union of Students. Now, this is a bit like, what shall we say, King Charles being sacked for the national anthem, because verse 3 that we never sing is death to the Scottish.
Oh, for real?
Yep.
Still your national anthem?
Yeah.
You guys need a new national anthem. Didn't you hear, you had Scottish kings. You had Scottish kings.
The national anthem is full of monarchy, empire, God, and hatred of Scots. I mean, you think, for goodness sakes, we need a new national anthem.
You had
can I
Scottish kings. All right.
John, can I ask this lady, how old was she when this tweet was made, when the statement was she made? How old was she?
I don't know her exact age, but she was certainly...
No, I mean, when the tweet was made.
Yeah, either a child or a young adult or teenager, something like that. I haven't got, in this item, I haven't got her.
She was really, really young.
Yes, it's
if
10
I'm
years
not mistaken, 11. She was about 11 or 12?
Maybe something like that, yeah, from what I gather. We could look it up, actually.
She was a child.
Yeah, I'll try and find it for you.
No, just... What's her name?
Shaima Dulali. And she is... can't find her age in this document.
On Twitter.
I mean, this is actually not the first time, old tweets have been dredged up,
right?
And thrown back at people. So it is a bit worrying for those who are active on Facebook or Twitter.
Yeah.
Guy, you're on the right point.
When are we gonna social media?
Guy, when are we gonna look through
later? And this young girl who probably wasn't even sure of what she might have been doing even at the time if she was a child.
Yeah.
But
we're
here
all
it
missing
is
the
as an
greater
adult
context
now.
here. We're completely missing the greater context.
Yeah.
We're missing the greater context because you can go through the Bible. You can go through the Bible. There's God's tweets right there. We don't know what
Okay, I found her age. She's 27 now, so she tweeted 10 years ago when she was 17.
All right. Okay. She was 17 only. Okay. But still not not hadn't reached the age of majority, for instance.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
like
I
that.
bet you
Though,
there's-
Ty. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Bible is God's tweets.
Yeah, there's some
Mm,
terrible
mm,
things in there
mm,
of groups
Yes.
that are still around walking right now.
mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
We should just go through the holy book and cancel the God. Why are we targeting this girl? We should be
Mhm.
targeting the God.
Yeah.
I like it.
Okay. Well, there is some good news coming up now, guys.
Oh, good.
You'll love to hear that there's been a poll in Canada, and the data show this is a 2021 census, and the data shows that the proportion of non-religious Canadians has more than doubled in the past 20 years. It's now 34.6%. Steve, can you sort out my audio? I don't know why I'm echoing. And also, the non-religious population has grown. So, that's what I said, isn't it? Non-religious Canadians has doubled, and the other thing is the religious Christian denominations have declined.
Mm-hmm.
So one's going up, the other one's going down, and this, of course, is in line with what's happening in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And the trend is in the right direction. So I thought you'd like to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent news.
Yep.
Yes, indeed.
Good news.
Yes.
Let's
But
hope we maintain the trend.
yes, indeed. There's a church somewhere in the US, I can't remember where, called Mars Hill. And it was the baby of a pastor called Mark Driscoll, who has been a superstar because Mars Hill grew under his leadership to have over 14,000 members in 5 states and 15 locations. It was the 3rd fastest growing church in the USA, but while on the surface everything appeared to be going well, behind the scenes, he built a reputation amongst his staff for his dictatorial leadership style.
Yeah.
And apparently there's been many cases of bullying and patterns of persistent sinful behavior.
Ooh.
What's the sinful behavior?
A guy in power abusing it? That never happened.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Unspecified sinful behavior. Allow
It
your
usually
mind,
means sex, doesn't it? But we don't know.
allow your mind to conjecture.
Yeah.
So what's happened because of his naughtiness, because they accused him of being guilty of arrogance and responding to conflict with a quick temper and harsh speech.
What in the world? That's God.
Yes. So what's happened is the church has imploded spectacularly. Attendances have plummeted, donations have dried up, and it's now closed its doors for good. And the other remaining 13 campuses have dissolved into autonomous entities.
Right.
This is despite the attempts of the church's board to craft a restoration plan to try and reform him and save the church. But what he did was he handed in his resignation and gave a half-arsed apology on video with little remorse. So there you go.
Well, on I don't know if you have Hulu in the UK, but they're showing now a documentary on Jerry Falwell Jr. on Hulu called "God Forbid," about the scandal that brought him down and made him lose his place at Liberty University. And it's just like any other, as Ty mentioned, this guy obsessed with power and God, and what's going on in his private life is that he's having these 3 ways with his wife and the pool boy.
Yes.
And lots of other stuff going on. And you realize that it's just, these human frailties just are just so abundant in these evangelical communities.
and not only pool boy naughtiness, but in the Jewish institutions across the US, apparently, there's been a rise in anti-Semitic incidents over the last couple of years. So they have been prompted, the synagogues have been prompted to up their preparation for this. So on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur this year, the Temple Emmanuel, which is just down the road from Manhattan Central Park, you may know it, David. A flyer was placed on every seat next to the prayer books, and it gave instructions as to what to do in the event of an attack on one of the high holiday services. So, it advises you, if running from the threat is not an option, crouch down between the pews or hide behind a pillar. Make yourself as small a target as possible. Remain quiet and still. So that's the state of synagogues in Manhattan.
Yeah, well, there's this fear. I mean, just like all forms of racism seem to have been on the rise over the last, let's say, 4 years. Certainly, the rise of anti-Semitic acts have been on the rise as well. And you had that in Philadelphia, that guy, running into a synagogue and just starting shooting people. Just like you had this guy, Dylan Roof, go into a church and start shooting people. Churches themselves are, and houses of worship are soft targets for people who have access to guns and who are mentally unstable, whether they have hate in their hearts or they're just, crazy people. They're soft targets. And, I have no problem at all with anyone who wants to have faith in their lives and seek a divine reality for themselves and their families. And certainly no one, regardless of their faith tradition, should have to fear that when they're in the middle of whatever they're doing in their house of worship, has to be fearful of being gunned down. I mean, what does that say about society when we can't even protect people this way?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the crime statistics show that incidents in not just synagogues, but churches, temples, and mosques have increased by 34.8% between 2014 and 2018. But the advice is talking about making yourself a small target. The way to do that is not to go to a house of worship.
Right. Become an atheist, and you'll live a lot longer. You'll live happier and you'll live longer.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know why they haven't reasoned it to the obvious conclusion.
Right.
Frank, you gave a report to the Global Atheist News Show about a federal judge who has ordered the city of Parkersburg in West Virginia to pay. You got that one ready? Yeah, $60,000 to cover the attorney fees and costs of the Freedom from Religion Foundation's case, which it won.
That's right, and forbidding the saying of the Lord's Prayer at every meeting of that township.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a step in the right direction from a court standpoint.
Yeah.
Let's hope more of that.
Absolutely. Let's hope that becomes an example for future cases in other states.
When Kentucky came out with a license plate that says, "In God We Trust" on the top of it, I wrote a letter to the governor and said, "Gee, can I have a custom-made one? Because you can get, those kind of custom-made plates, things that have your name on them and all. I want mine to say, 'In reason I trust.'" And I got a really nice letter back from him that said, "Nope." Nope.
or just, how about Frank, as you mentioned, and as Ty has mentioned earlier, but why not go back to E Pluribus Unum? Out of one many.
Yeah.
The decision to put "In God We Trust" on American money came out of the Cold War fighting the Soviets.
I really can't think of a single better motto or to put on a license plate or a driver's license.
Yeah.
Or I mean, it just says exactly what the United States used to be in favor
exactly.
of.
Exactly.
So here's a case where we do want to turn back time and revisit history.
Right. If you
finally, guys.
Yeah, if you want to make America great again, go back to E Pluribus Unum.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when we lived under that, we hadn't perfected it yet.
No,
but it was the target we were aiming for.
Right.
And it needs to be that way today.
Right. And I'm affirming this as a black man with family who came here as slaves, brought from their taken from their homes. Like the founding fathers were terrible people, but they did come up with a good motto.
Right.
And I'm like, can we at least take the motto? Can we at least of all the things that we're willing to take from them, can we at least have that? That would be an improvement.
Yeah.
Right. Because look, we all have to aspire to something, right?
Yes.
I think we should. I think
looking at that is I think really important. I mean, we know that black people weren't allowed to drink from the same water fountains, for God's sake. You know what I mean? It's just a terrible way of it's an apartheid living conditions.
I think we ought to start a movement, though, to press for that motto to come back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do that on Facebook today. I'm going to,
Good idea.
You got my vote.
I'm familiar with Larry Rhodes, but what he's been doing is he has a rubber stamp that prints on every dollar that he has over "In God We Trust," E Pluribus Unum, and then he spends money on with those dollars.
Nice.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we ought to issue those stamps to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Finally, guys, you're like this. It's hate speech Christian pastor Greg Locke. Now, there's a name. There's a tour going on. It's called Reawaken America, and it's to do with the election. It's trying to drum up sympathy amongst the Republican evangelicals and denigrate the Democrats. And he visited Pennsylvania with this tour over the weekend, and throngs of people had come to hear him because he's famous for his conspiracy theories and inflammatory rhetoric. But what did he say? He targeted Pope Francis. He said, if you trust anybody but Jesus to get you to heaven, you ain't going. He said, you say, well, what about the Pope? And he said, he ain't no Pope. He's a pimp. He's prostituted the church. And when he was challenged with this by an actual Catholic who was attending the meeting, he doubled down. He said, Catholicism is idolatry 100%. I will not be silent whether you follow or not. It is a false pagan religion and so filled with perversity, it's ridiculous.
I thought Protestants and Catholics get along. What's going on?
No,
I thought they loved each other.
No,
they're great.
No.
They hang out all the time.
As far as the Protestants are concerned, the Catholics are not Christians.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not Christians. And I don't know what it is with Greg Locke. He seems to be on a roll recently. He just wants to shoot his mouth off and just going off and saying things that are completely out there. I think he gets off on controversy. He gets off on being inflammatory. And unfortunately, there are people who feed on every word that comes out of his mouth. I personally think he's crazy.
I think Fox News will hire him soon.
Well, the audience at this meeting were standing and applauding and cheering him. So there you go.
It just goes to show you that the best way to sum up theology is to realize that it's nothing more than a circular firing squad.
Yeah.
Good point.
Circular firing
All
squad. I've
theology.
never heard it called that before.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, you've been wonderful. Guy has already had to go. He had something else to do. So we'll thank him for having been here. And I'll thank you while you're present for having been here. And I'll thank anybody who watches this show. We've enjoyed it. I hope you do too.
Amen.
Thank you.
Say bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Where's my outro? Several clergy
Russell was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that guy?